These shirts are hard to come by.
What'd you hit me for?
'Cause I know you.
Leather it.
No, don't leather it.
Guys, welcome to a classic film review of 1953's John Wayne Western, Hondo, starring, of course, the Duke himself, along with Geraldine Page and Ward Bond. Now, this was directed by John Farrow, and it's the story of an army dispatch rider, Hondo Lane, who stumbles out of the wilderness and comes across a woman and her young son living in the middle of Apache territory. Now, it's not long before a truce is broken between the army and the Apache, and Hondo must become their protector. Now, this is a John Wayne movie that I don't hear that many people talk about these days, and that's a bit of a shame. It does sit in that gap between Red River and Rio Grande and The Searchers and Rio Bravo, but it's notable in quite a few of its own ways. It was one of Wayne's favourite films of his own for a start, and was nominated for 2 Oscars, and also was originally intended to be a 3D movie. Let's take a look. So 1953's Hondo sees John Wayne's titular character arrive at the ranch of Angie Lowe and her young son Johnny. Now, Angie tells Hondo that her husband will be back any minute, but judging by the disrepair he sees, it's clear it's just her and the boy. And so he urges them to leave with him, as the army have just broken a truce with the Apache and it's about to kick off. Anyway, she won't leave, and so he decides to stay with them. He shoes the horses, sharpens her axe blade, and lets John Wayne's stunt double break in a horse that he buys from her. Now, of course, before he eventually does leave, the pair fall for each other, even though she's not much to look at, in her words. And he's part Apache, having lived among them for 5 years until his wife died.
Must have been very interesting, living with the Apache.
I liked it.
This Indian wife you have.
Had. She's dead.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bring up an unhappy memory.
Now, Hondo, on the surface, seems like a pretty straightforward John Wayne Western entry, and it's no secret that it does, in fact, share some plot similarities with that same year's Western epic, Shane. Wayne, in fact, blames some of the poor reception that Hondo received on Shane, which is a better film in my opinion, but in itself isn't the most original. But that's the one thing I love about the Western genre. There's just so many directions and interpretations of classic themes.
A while back, a man came at me with a gun. I had to kill him.
Good. Indian?
No, he was a white man, Johnny, but I didn't have any choice.
Ouch!
Oh, I told you to press down on the shank and then you won't stick yourself.
But anyway, for me, this is up there with some of my favourite John Wayne roles. His Hondo Lane is, of course, a rugged, gruff man of the frontier, but he's, of course, a bit deeper than that. He's observant enough to realise there's no man about the house here, and caring enough to be a role model to Geraldine Page's young son, Johnny, and not too soft, as his ad hoc swimming lessons will demonstrate.
I can't swim.
How old are you?
6.
Heck, he even has a pet dog that he refuses to feed, stating that the pooch, like everyone else on the frontier, must work and hunt for his breakfast. Now, this also sits in that set of movies that's a meditation on the end of the Wild West. The US cavalry have broken their truce here with the natives, and at one point in the movie there's talk of them gathering their forces in an attempt to pretty much wipe them out, thus signalling the end of an era. And there's also a subversion of the usual stereotypes also. The Indian chief, Vittorio, is fearsome, but he's also honourable and makes little Johnny a blood brother after seeing respectable courage in the young lad.
You're not fit, Apache?
No.
He fear her to mother, but not that to self. He brave, like Apache boy.
Now, it is in fact Page's no-good husband who's the real villain of the piece and the catalyst for a mid-movie tragedy that I won't spoil here. Now, elsewhere in the cast we have grizzled cavalry scout Buffalo, played by the legend Ward Bond, and a gung-ho but very young and naive Lieutenant McKay, played by Tom Irish. Both doing great work, but I do have to mention Geraldine Page's performance here because I'm just not a fan of it. I mean, she was nominated for an Oscar here, so what do I know? But Page was fresh from being a theatre star, and this was her first real film role, I think, and it's just not for me.
This ranch looks like it's been here a little while.
Yes, I was born here. My husband was raised here, too. He's an orphan. His parents got killed in a wagon train massacre, so my father took him in.
Handy.
Now, Hondo was originally shown in 3D, hence a few of those shots where knives and gun barrels are pushed right into the camera lens, which is a bit jarring, but doesn't happen too often. I don't think it was shown much in 3D theatrically, as by the time it was released, that 3D craze was pretty much fizzling out. So yeah, in my opinion, this is a much underrated Western. It was loosely based on a novel by prolific Western author Louis L'Amour called The Gift of Cochise. Now here Wayne was co-producer, although he still has that stereotypical people got to do what they got to do attitude. His character's part Indian and sympathetic to their ways and customs, and I think a lot of Wayne's characters were like this more than people realise.
I hate to think of your hair hanging from the center pole of an Apache wikia. But a long time ago I made me a rule. I let people do what they want to do.
Now I think Wayne played quite a few Western heroes who mixed out-and-out patriotism with the desire to ensure Native Americans weren't subjected to just genocidal conflict. Here he's no nonsense, but only when he has to be. And I feel like this is more of a domestic Western, what with his little surrogate family and his canine companion. So Hondo's a short movie. It runs at just over an hour and 20 minutes, so it does move at a bit of a pace. Still, it is a tiny bit of a shame that after a dramatic and quite introspective hour, we do have to lapse into shoot 'em up mode as our protagonists quite literally circle the wagons, but it's still a great action set piece.
Hondo! All this circle's doing is protect the horses. We gotta turn some wagons over.
Then stay here. That's what they expect. We gotta do what they don't expect. That's why all the heavy artillery and Buffalo's wagons. Buffalo!
Now, of course, as I mentioned, Wayne would have many more classic westerns in him in the decades to come, some considered the greatest of all time. Now, Hondo isn't quite in the same tier as The Searchers or Rio Bravo, although I'm sure I heard somewhere that John Ford actually directed some of this movie to let John Farrow move on to his next directing job. Now, Farrow, of course, would team up with Wayne again in 1955 for the World War II naval actioner The Sea Chase, which I'm sure I haven't seen, so I'll have to track that one down. Here, though, he fashions a film that probably personifies the John Wayne stereotype the most, a whirlwind of Indian fights, cavalry battles, saloon poker games, come fist fights, and everything wrapped up nicely in just 83 minutes. Go check it out.
General Crook will be here within a month with a large force.
That'll be the end of the Apache.
Yeah. End of a way of life. Too bad. It's a good way.
Wagons forward! Yeah!